My body isn't your resource anymore. She texted at 6:47 a.m. I replied, done. Her lawyer laughed when I walked into court alone. He stopped laughing when the judge read page 1 of my petition. Then I found the medical records. She'd been on birth control for 8 years while I believed I was infertile. My name is Austin Sutton. I'm 47 years old, and I spent 22 years as a military pilot before transitioning to aviation engineering for a civilian aerospace contractor. I'm the kind of man who reads technical manuals for fun, who measures twice and cuts once, who believes in precision over impulse. My father, a Vietnam vet who made a home with more scars than medals, taught me that discipline isn't just about following orders. It's about building systems so solid that chaos can't touch them. I married Serena 11 years ago. She was 33, recently divorced, with a 5-year-old son named Jordan. I fell hard for her. She had this energy, this brightness that made every room feel warmer. And Jordan, that kid became mine the moment I met him. His biological father was a ghost, some guy who'd burned out on drugs and disappear before Jordan's 2nd birthday. I didn't just step into a father role. I became his father. Little league games, science fair projects, late-night talks about girls and grades, and what it means to be a good man. I paid for his private school, his travel soccer team, his college fund. He called me Dad. Not stepdad. Dad. But Serena and I, we had one shadow we couldn't shake. We want a child together. We tried for years. 8 years, to be exact. Month after month, negative test after negative test. Finally, she insisted we see a specialist. The doctor, a military physician I'd known from my service days, ran tests on both of us. Then he called me into his office alone. Austin, he said, his voice too careful, too practiced. The damage from your ejection injury, the spinal trauma you sustained 7 years ago, it's affected your fertility. I'm sorry, but the chances of you fathering a child are effectively zero. I sat there in that sterile office, staring at charts I didn't want to understand, feeling something inside me collapse. Serena cried when I told her. She held my hand and said all the right things. We have Jordan. That's enough. You're already an amazing father. I buried the grief, pushed it down deep, told myself she was right. I didn't know she'd been lying the entire time. Sunday morning, 6:47 a.m. I was rebuilding a carburetor from a '68 Mustang I'd been restoring, hands covered in grease, NPR playing low on the workbench radio. My phone buzzed. A text from Serena. Let's be clear. My body isn't your resource anymore. Deal with it. I read it twice. No context. No preamble. Just a declaration, cold and final, like she was canceling a subscription. I wiped my hands on a rag, stared at the screen, and felt something click into place. Not anger. Not even surprise. Just clarity. I typed one word back. Done. Then I walked into the house, unlocked the filing cabinet in my office, and pulled out a folder I'd labeled Contingency S 6 years ago. I opened it on my desk and started reading. Because here's the thing about being a pilot, about being an engineer. You don't just hope the systems hold. You build them so that when they fail, you're already 3 steps ahead. And Serena had just activated the fail-safe she never knew existed. The folder wasn't thick by accident. It was 6 years of preparation compressed into 43 pages of documentation, contracts, and strategic positioning. 6 years ago, when Serena first came to me with her dream of starting a wellness brand, I didn't just throw money at it and hope for the best. I built her a structure, a fortress, actually, one she never bothered to understand. She'd been inspired by some retreat in Sedona, came home glowing and talking about holistic healing, organic supplements, empowering women to reclaim their bodies. She had vision. I'll give her that. She could paint a picture that made people believe. But vision doesn't file FDA paperwork. Vision doesn't negotiate supplier contracts or navigate import regulations. That's where I came in. I used $80,000 from my deferred military pension to seed her business. But I didn't hand her a check. I created the Sutton Family Trust, a legal entity designed to protect assets and ensure long-term stability. At least, that's how I explained it to her. What I didn't explain was the fine print buried in Article 4, Section 3. The clause that stated any public declaration of marital dissolution would trigger an automatic compliance review of all trust-affiliated entities. She signed without reading. I remember the moment. She was sitting at her kitchen table, excited, bouncing her leg like she always did when she was impatient. "Babe, I trust you with this stuff," she'd said, scribbling her signature across 3 separate documents. "You're the detail guy. I'm the vision." I'd smiled, kissed her forehead, filed the papers that same afternoon. The business took off faster than either of us expected. Her brand, Radiant Essence, capitalized on the wellness boom. Adaptogenic powders, organic teas, subscription boxes filled with sage bundles and rose quartz. It all looked beautiful. Clean labels, earthy packaging, her face on every marketing piece, glowing and authentic. But behind the aesthetics was infrastructure. My infrastructure. Every supplier contract I negotiated. Every compliance certification I obtained through contacts I'd made during my years working with military logistics and aerospace suppliers. The FDA registration, the USDA organic certifications, the liability insurance, the warehouse logistics. I handed her a turnkey operation and let her think she'd built it herself. And the board of directors? She knew they existed. She'd even met 2 of them at a launch event once. What she didn't know was that all 4 of them were people I'd served with. Tom Hendricks, former Air Force logistics officer. Patricia Vale, retired Navy JAG attorney. David Kushner, ex-Army supply chain manager. And Rachel Ortiz, a civilian compliance specialist I'd worked with on aerospace contracts. None of them owed Serena anything, but they owed me. The trust structure meant that while Serena was listed as founder and CEO, voting control remained with the board. And per the operating agreement, any reputational damage to the trust stemming from a founding member's actions would trigger protective measures. Asset freezes, vendor notifications, compliance audits. Her text message, time-stamped and saved to my phone, was reputational damage. A public disavowal of our marriage, sent via a digital platform with metadata I could submit as evidence. She just activated the kill switch. I printed the text message, added it to the folder, and opened my laptop. The petition I drafted 3 years ago, just as a precaution, was still saved in my cloud storage. I pulled it up, updated the date and timestamp, printed all 18 pages, and signed each one. By 9 a.m., I'd scheduled a filing appointment at the county courthouse for Tuesday morning. Serena thought she was making a statement. She didn't realize she'd just signed the demolition order for everything she thought she owned. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that comes after a storm you didn't know was building. I wore my best suit, navy blue, pressed the night before with the same precision I used to prep flight gear. No tie, no lawyer, no visible emotion. Just me, a manila folder, and 18 pages of documentation that would change everything. The courthouse hallway smelled like old wood and bureaucracy, fluorescent lights humming overhead. I arrived 30 minutes early, found a bench, and waited. Serena showed up 10 minutes before her scheduled time, flanked by her attorney, a guy named Trevor Hastings. Mid-40s, expensive watch that caught the light when he gestured, the kind of practice smile that suggested he'd already won before the hearing started. Serena wore a cream-colored blazer over a silk blouse, her hair pulled back in a way that said professional, composed, untouchable. She didn't look at me. Not once. Hastings did, though. He sized me up like I was a technical glitch he'd have to troubleshoot, something annoying, but ultimately harmless. When the clerk called our case, we filed into the courtroom. The judge, a gray-haired woman named Carolyn Vickers, settled behind the bench with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for 30 years. She opened the file, scanned the first page, and looked up. "Mr. Sutton," she said, glancing at me over her reading glasses. "You're representing yourself in this matter?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, my voice steady. Hastings leaned forward, his voice smooth and practiced, designed to sound reasonable. "Your Honor, if I may, my client's husband has chosen to proceed without legal representation. We assume this is preliminary, perhaps a placeholder filing until he retains proper counsel. Given the complexity of the business structures involved, we anticipate he'll seek professional guidance shortly." He said it with just enough condescension to make it clear he thought I was out of my depth. Amateur hour. A man trying to play lawyer without understanding the rules. Judge Vickers didn't take the bait. She simply turned to the first page of my petition and began reading aloud, her voice clear and clinical. "In the matter of Sutton versus Sutton, The petitioner asserts that pursuant to the foundational documents of the Sutton Family Trust, Article 4, Section 3, any public declaration of marital dissolution shall immediately trigger a compliance review of all trust-affiliated entities due to provisions ensuring reputational preservation and brand continuity. Her voice was steady, almost mechanical, but I watched Hastings' expression shift. The smirk faded. His eyes moved to Serena, who was staring at me now, confusion beginning to replace the earlier confidence. "Your Honor," Hastings interjected, his tone sharper now, less polished. "May I review that document privately before we proceed? I'd like to examine the language in question." "No, Counselor," Judge Vickers said without looking up. "We're in session. This is on the record. You'll have access to all file documents through standard discovery." She continued reading, her finger tracing down the page. The triggering event occurred on April 10th at 6:47 a.m., when the respondent sent a text message to the petitioner stating, and I quote, "Let's be clear. My body isn't your resource anymore. Deal with it." This constitutes a public declaration of marital breakdown via digital communication, time-stamped and preserved as Exhibit A. Serena's face went pale. Her hands, which had been resting calmly in her lap, clenched into fists. Hastings leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming once against the polished wood table before going completely still. Judge Vickers turned the page, the sound sharp in the quiet courtroom. Per the terms of the Trust's operating agreement, this triggering event initiates a protective compliance phase. All assets currently dispersed under the Radiant Essence business entity are subject to administrative freeze, pending board review and audit completion. Vendor contracts, financial disbursements, and executive authority are suspended until compliance verification is achieved. Hastings' hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the table. Then he shot to his feet. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this clause was not intended for enforcement in a marital dispute. It's a governance provision designed to protect the business entity, not to be weaponized in divorce proceedings." Judge Vickers looked at him over her glasses, her expression neutral. "Then why was it signed and notarized by both parties, Counselor?" Silence. Heavy and complete. She flipped another page, her voice unchanged. "According to the trust documents, Mrs. Serena Sutton acknowledged and agreed to these terms on March 22nd, 6 years ago. Her signature is here, witnessed and notarized. The language is unambiguous. The clause is legally binding." Hastings tried again, his voice taking on an edge of desperation. "Your Honor, my client didn't fully understand the implications of what she was signing at the time. She relied on her husband's representation that these were standard protective measures." "Counselor," the judge interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind. "Your client signed a document establishing a multi-million-dollar business entity. She is listed as the CEO and founder of Radiant Essence. Are you stating for the record that she did not understand the terms of her own company's governance structure?" Hastings hesitated. His mouth opened, closed. He glanced at Serena, who was staring at me now, her jaw tight, her hands clenched so hard her knuckles had gone white. Judge Vickers closed the folder with a decisive thump. "The structure stands. The compliance review proceeds, as outlined in the trust documentation. No stay will be granted at this time. Next hearing is scheduled for May 18th at 2 p.m. We're adjourned." The gavel came down. One sharp strike that echoed through the room. Hastings turned to Serena immediately, leaning in close, whispering something urgent, probably something about appeals or motions or next steps. She didn't respond. She didn't even seem to hear him. She was still looking at me, and for the first time since that text message, I saw it in her eyes. Not anger, not defiance, not even confusion. Fear. Raw, undiluted fear. I stood, picked up my folder, straightened my jacket, and walked out of the courtroom without a word. No eye contact, no acknowledgement. Because when the systems are sound, when the documentation is airtight, you don't need to argue. You don't need to grandstand or make speeches. You just let the machinery work. I didn't go home after court. I went to my office, a small workspace I kept at the aerospace facility where I consulted on avionics systems and flight safety protocols. I needed silence. I needed the kind of controlled environment where I could think clearly, process information without distraction. And I needed to go through the rest of the documents I've been avoiding for 3 days. The medical records. When I'd filed for divorce, I'd requested full disclosure of all financial and medical documents as part of the discovery process. Standard procedure in dissolution cases, especially when business entities and shared assets are involved. What I didn't expect was what arrived in the courier package Monday afternoon. A thick manila envelope marked confidential medical records, Serena L. Sutton. I spread the papers across my desk now, my hands steadier than I felt inside. The first document was a billing statement from Serena's gynecologist, dated 6 months ago. Routine annual exam. Pap smear. Blood work. Nothing unusual. But stapled to the back was a secondary invoice, smaller print. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. IUD replacement. Dated 4 years ago. I stared at it. Read the words again. Then a third time, willing them to say something different. IUD. Intrauterine device. Birth control. 4 years ago. 2 full years after the doctor had told me I was infertile. 2 years after I'd sat in that cold examination room and been told my body had failed, that the ejection injury had stolen my ability to father children. My pulse didn't quicken. I didn't feel rage or betrayal in that moment. I felt cold, mechanical, like I was reading a technical schematic with a critical flaw highlighted in red, a problem that needed immediate analysis and correction. I flipped to the next page. Another billing statement. Same clinic. IUD insertion. Dated 9 years ago. 6 months after we'd started trying for a baby. 6 months after Serena had come to me, tears in her eyes, saying she wanted us to have a child together, that Jordan deserved a sibling, that she wanted to give me that gift. The next document was a prescription record. Birth control pills. Refilled every 3 months for the past 7 years. Continuous. Uninterrupted coverage. Under her name. From a pharmacy across town. Not the one we normally used. Not the one where I picked up my own prescriptions or Jordan's allergy medication. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling, forcing myself to process this logically. She'd been on birth control the entire time. The entire time we'd been trying. The entire time I believed I was the one who couldn't have children, that my injury had robbed us of that future. And the doctor, the military physician who delivered the diagnosis. I found his name in another document, buried 3 pages deep. A payment receipt. Electronic transfer. $15,000. From Serena's personal checking account to Dr. Raymond Kellerman. Dated 3 days after my appointment. 3 days after he'd looked me in the eye and told me my body was broken. $15,000. For a diagnosis that was a lie. I pulled up my own medical records, the ones I'd requested separately from the VA Medical Center. The complete file for my ejection injury 7 years ago. Spinal trauma, yes. Compressed vertebrae in my lower back. Nerve damage that had required months of physical therapy. But nothing about fertility. Nothing about reproductive complications. The injury had affected my spine, my mobility for a while, but not my ability to father a child. I scrolled through page after page. Consulted with 3 different specialists. None of them had mentioned infertility. Not once. She'd paid him. She'd paid Dr. Kellerman $15,000 to lie to me. To look me in the eye and deliver a diagnosis that would destroy me, that would make me carry the weight of failure for 8 years. I leaned forward, elbows on my desk, and pressed my palms against my eyes, breathing slowly through my nose. For 8 years, I'd carried the weight of believing I'd failed her. Failed us. That my body, my injury, the sacrifice I'd made in service to my country had stolen our chance at a family. I'd watch her put on a brave face every month when another test came back negative. Watch her tell me Jordan was enough, that I was enough, that we didn't need another child to be complete. And the whole time, she'd been taking pills, wearing an IUD, making absolutely certain she'd never get pregnant, because she didn't want my child. The realization settled over me like a weight I couldn't shake. Not anger. Not yet. Just a hollow, bottomless grief that seemed to pull at everything inside me. Jordan. I thought about Jordan. The kid I'd raised, loved, mentored, coached through life. The kid who called me dad, who'd never known his biological father, who I'd poured everything into. I'd given him everything I had because I thought he was the only child I'd ever have. The only chance I'd get to be a father. And maybe he still was. Maybe that chapter was closed now. But not because of some injury. Not because my body had failed. Because Serena had decided for both of us. She'd stolen that choice. That possibility. That future. and she'd made me believe it was my fault. I gathered the documents carefully, placed them in a folder marked Evidence, Medical Fraud, and locked it in my desk drawer next to the trust documents. Then I sat in the silence of my office, letting the grief settle, letting it compress into something harder, something denser, something I could use. It started on Wednesday morning. Serena called me 7 times before I finally picked up. "What did you do?" Her voice was sharp, panicked. "Austin, what the hell did you do?" "I filed a petition," I said calmly. "You got the notice. My accounts are frozen. All of them. Business, personal, everything. I can't access anything." I leaned back in my office chair. "That's the compliance protocol. It's in the trust documents you signed." "This is insane," she shouted. "I can't pay my staff. I can't process orders. The website payment system is down. Vendors are calling me asking about authorization holds." "Then you should speak with the board," I said. "They're handling the review." "The board? Your board? Those are your people, Austin." "They're the trust's people," I corrected. "And they're following the procedures you agreed to." She made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "You're destroying my business." "No," I said quietly. "I'm protecting the trust's assets. There's a difference." She hung up. By Thursday, the calls started coming from other people. Suppliers. Partners. The woman who ran her fulfillment warehouse. All of them had received the same notification. Operational authority suspended pending compliance review. Patricia Vale, one of the board members and a former Navy JAG attorney, called me that afternoon. "The freeze is holding," she said. "We've notified all primary vendors and financial institutions." Mrs. Sutton attempted to access the business bank account this morning. The bank referred her to our office. "What about the corporate partnership?" I asked. "The one with the spa chain. They received our letter yesterday. They're requesting documentation of ownership structure before proceeding with the contract. We've informed them the review process typically takes 60 to 90 days. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "And the woman who invested in the business? The $200,000 partner? Catherine Voss. She called our office this morning. She's requesting clarification on her equity position. Apparently, she was under the impression she owned 20% of the company." "What does the paperwork say?" "She's listed as a consultant. No equity stake. No voting rights. Just a service agreement that expired 6 months ago." I closed my eyes. Another person Serena had manipulated. Another relationship built on lies. "Send her the documentation," I said. "She deserves to know the truth." Friday morning, I was in the garage working on the Mustang when Jordan came out. He was holding his phone, his face tight with anger. "Is it true?" he asked. I looked up from the engine. "Is what true?" "Mom's saying you're trying to steal her business. That you're using some legal trick to take everything she built." I wiped my hands on a rag, choosing my words carefully. "I'm not stealing anything. I'm enforcing the agreements we both signed." "She's freaking out, Dad. She can't pay rent. Can't buy groceries. You froze everything." "Jordan," I said, meeting his eyes, "there are things about this situation you don't understand yet. Things between your mother and me that have nothing to do with you." "Then explain it to me," he demanded. "Because right now, it looks like you're being a controlling jerk who can't handle a divorce like an adult." The words stung, but I understood. Serena had gotten to him first, framed the narrative her way. "I will explain everything," I said. "But not today. When the time is right, when all the facts are clear, we'll talk. I promise." He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. "Whatever, man. I'm staying at Mom's tonight." He walked back into the house, and I stood there in the garage, holding a greasy rag, feeling the first real break in the armor I'd built around myself. Losing the business was one thing. Losing Jordan was something I hadn't prepared for. The call came Sunday evening. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Austin Sutton." The voice was rough, uncertain. "Who's this?" "My name is Dara Paulson. I'm Jordan's biological father." I went very still. "What do you want?" "I need to talk to you. In person. It's about Serena." We met at a diner off Highway 40. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting on the burner since morning. Derek was 43 but looked older. Worn down. Thin in a way that spoke of years of hard living. "I've been clean for 3 years," he said without preamble. "Got into a program, been working construction, trying to make something of myself." "Good for you," I said, my voice neutral. He looked down at his coffee. Serena reached out to me 2 weeks ago. Said she was getting divorced. Said she might need me to testify about Jordan's custody. My jaw tightened. Testify what? That you're not his real father. That she wants to give me another chance. That maybe Jordan should spend more time with his biological family. The manipulation was breathtaking. She was going to use his biological father to push me out of Jordan's life. Are you planning to do it? I asked. Derek looked up, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't expected. Shame and anger. No, he said firmly. That's why I'm here. I wanted you to know what she's planning. Why would you tell me this? He leaned forward. Because 3 years ago, when I finally got out of rehab and tried to see my son, Serena wouldn't let me near him. Said I was toxic, dangerous. That Jordan didn't need a father like me in his life. And she was right. I wasn't ready. But you know what she told me? I waited. She said Jordan already had a father. You. She said you were the best thing that ever happened to him. That you'd been there for him in ways I never could be. She said Jordan called you dad, and that was how it should be. His voice broke slightly. Now she's trying to use me to hurt you. To take that away from both of you. And I won't do it. Whatever happened between you two, Jordan loves you. That kid worships you. And I'm not going to be the weapon she uses to destroy that. I sat back, processing. What did you tell her? I told her I'd think about it. But I'm not showing up to any custody hearing on her side. If you need me to testify for you, to tell a judge that you're the only real father Jordan's ever had, I'll do it. I studied his face. Saw the sincerity there. The hard-won sobriety. The man who'd lost his son once and didn't want to lose him again to someone else's manipulation. Thank you, I said quietly. Derek nodded. He's a good kid. You did that. You raised him right. Don't let her take that away. We shook hands in the parking lot. And as I drove home, I realized something. Serena's web of manipulation was starting to unravel. Not because I was pulling threads, but because the people she'd used were finally seeing her clearly. The invitation arrived in my email 2 weeks before Serena's 40th birthday. A digital card with flowing script and watercolor flowers. Join us for a celebration of growth, transformation, and radiant living. I deleted it. Then Jordan forwarded it to me with a message. Mom really wants you there. Please don't make this weird. So I went. Not for Serena. For Jordan. The venue was a rooftop garden downtown. The kind of place Serena loved. Twinkle lights strung between potted trees. A bar serving organic wine and kombucha. Round tables with white linens. About 75 people milled around. Mostly women from her wellness circles. A few business associates, some family. I arrived with a gift. A vintage Cartier watch I bought months ago. Back when I'd still believed we had a future. Now it felt like evidence of my own naivety. Serena was holding court near the center of the space, wearing a white dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She saw me, and for a split second, something flickered in her eyes. Then she looked away. I found a table in the back, sat down, and waited. The speeches started an hour in. Her business partner, the one who didn't know she'd been scammed, went first. Then her wellness coach, a guy named Trevor Ashford who I'd never met, but had seen plenty of in the billing records. Mid-30s, athletic build, the kind of smile that sold confidence workshops and meditation retreats. He talked about Serena's vision, her courage, her commitment to empowering women. Then Serena stood up to give her own speech. I want to thank everyone who's been part of this journey, she began, her voice warm and practiced. Building Radiant Essence has been the most challenging and rewarding experience of my life. She went on to thank her team, her vendors, her community of followers. Then she said, I especially want to thank Trevor. You've been my guide, my mentor, my rock through some of the hardest moments. Your wisdom has transformed not just my business, but my life. She mentioned him 3 more times, by name, with that glowing smile that used to be reserved for me. She never mentioned my name once. I looked around the room. A few people were glancing at me, uncomfortable. They knew who I was, knew I was her husband, knew I'd funded the business she was celebrating, and she'd erased me completely. I stood up, walked to her table, and picked up the gift I'd left there, the small box with the Cartier logo. Serena stopped mid-sentence. Austin, what are you? Keep the watch, I said quietly. You've earned it. Then I walked out. The video went viral within 48 hours. Someone had recorded the moment, posted it to TikTok with a caption, "When a husband who funded everything gets erased." It had 3 million views by Thursday. The comments were brutal. She thanked her coach 3 times, but not her husband. This is why you read the contracts, ladies. He funded her dreams, and she couldn't even say his name. Serena's Instagram went from supportive to savage overnight. People demanding explanations, asking about the business structure, wanting to know who really built Radiant Essence. By Friday, 2 of her sponsors had pulled their partnerships, and I hadn't said a word. I didn't have to. The truth was doing the work for me. It was Tuesday afternoon when Jordan came to my office. I was reviewing engineering specs for a flight control system when he knocked. "Can we talk?" he asked. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat down, and I could see something had changed. The anger was gone. In its place was confusion. "Hurt. I found something," he said quietly. He pulled out his phone, opened his photos, and handed it to me. It was a screenshot of a text conversation between Serena and Trevor. "Trevor, when are you going to tell him about Jordan?" "Serena, tell him what?" "That the kid's baggage from my past. He already knows that." "Trevor, I mean that you're planning to send him to boarding school once you get the settlement." "Serena, once I have Austin's money, Jordan can go to Exeter or Andover. Get him out of the house. Start fresh. Just you and me." I looked up at Jordan. His eyes were wet, but he wasn't crying. He was just staring at me, waiting. "When did you find this?" I asked. "Yesterday. I borrowed her laptop to print something for school. The messages popped up." I handed the phone back. "I'm sorry you had to see that." "She called me baggage," he said, his voice breaking. "She's planning to send me away so she can be with him." "Jordan, you knew, didn't you? That's why you've been doing all this. The legal stuff. The freeze. You were protecting yourself. And me." I leaned forward. "I didn't know about this specifically, but I knew your mother had been lying to me. To both of us." He wiped his eyes. "I told you that you were being a jerk. I said you were controlling. And the whole time, you were just trying to protect us." "You didn't know," I said. "She's your mother. You were supposed to be able to trust her." "Can I stay with you?" he asked. "Like, permanently? I don't want to live with her anymore." "Of course," I said immediately. "You're always welcome here. This is your home." He nodded, then looked down at his hands. "There's something else you should know. About Mom. About why you guys couldn't have kids." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "I heard her talking to Trevor on the phone last week. She was upset about the court stuff. And she said something about how she'd wasted years pretending to try for a baby when she'd been on birth control the whole time. She said she paid some doctor to tell you that you couldn't have kids." The room went silent. Even though I already knew, hearing it from Jordan made it real in a different way. "She lied to you," Jordan said. "About everything." I stood up, walked around the desk, and put my hand on his shoulder. "Listen to me. None of this is your fault. Not the divorce. Not her choices. None of it." "I know," he said, "but I'm still sorry. For what I said before. For not believing you. You have nothing to apologize for." He stood up and hugged me. Really hugged me, the way he used it when he was younger, before he got too cool for that kind of thing. "You're my dad," he said into my shoulder. "Not Derek. Not anyone else. You." And for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than cold calculation. I felt what I've been fighting for all along. Family. The courtroom was packed for the final hearing. News of the viral video had turned this from a private divorce into a public spectacle. Judge Vickers had issued a strict order. No cameras, no recording devices. But that didn't stop the hallway from filling with people hoping to witness the conclusion. I arrived early with Jordan. He'd insisted on coming. Said he wanted to be there when it all ended. Derek Paulson was already waiting outside, wearing a suit that looked borrowed but clean. He nodded at me, and I nodded back. Serena arrived with Trevor Hastings, who looked significantly less confident than he had at our first hearing. The medical fraud evidence had been submitted 2 weeks ago. The board's compliance report had been filed. Catherine Voss, the investor who'd lost $200,000, had submitted her own affidavit detailing Serena's misrepresentations. Judge Vickers took the bench, reviewed the files in front of her, and looked up. "This has been an unusual case," she began. "I've reviewed all submitted evidence, including the medical records indicating deliberate deception regarding Mr. Sutton's fertility, the business structure documentation showing misrepresentation to investors, and the testimony from the minor child, Jordan Sutton, regarding his mother's intentions." Serena's face was pale. Her hands were clenched in her lap. "Mr. Hastings," the judge continued, "does your client wish to make any statement before I issue my ruling?" Hastings stood. Your Honor, my client has been under tremendous stress. The viral video, the public scrutiny, the counselor. Judge Vickers interrupted. I asked if your client wishes to make a statement, not if you wish to make excuses. Hastings sat down. Serena shook her head. Very well, the judge said. She turned her notes. The trust structure stands as written. All assets of Radiant Essence remain under trust control. Mrs. Sutton's equity stake, which was always conditional per the signed agreements, is revoked due to material breach of trust obligations and reputational harm to the entity. Serena's lawyer started to object, but the judge held up her hand. Furthermore, regarding custody of Jordan Sutton, age 16, the court has reviewed his testimony, the evidence of parental alienation attempts, and the text messages indicating Mrs. Sutton's intention to send the minor to boarding school against his wishes. Primary custody is awarded to Mr. Austin Sutton. Mrs. Sutton will have supervised visitation rights, pending successful completion of family counseling. Jordan's hand found mine under the table. I squeezed it. Regarding the division of marital assets, Judge Vickers continued. Mr. Sutton's military pension, earned prior to the marriage and protected under federal law, remains solely his property. Mrs. Sutton's claim to 50% is denied. I saw Serena's shoulders slump. However, the judge said, and I looked up, Mr. Sutton has submitted a proposal for a settlement payment of $50,000 to be paid over 2 years to assist with Mrs. Sutton's transition. The court finds this reasonable and orders its implementation. Jordan looked at me, surprised. I told him I was going to do it, but he hadn't believed me. Your Honor, Hastings said, standing again. My client believes she's entitled to significantly more. Your client is entitled to what the law and her signed agreements allow, Judge Vickers said firmly. She entered into a trust structure of her own free will. She signed waivers. She committed fraud regarding medical information. She attempted to manipulate her minor child against his custodial parent. The court is being generous with this settlement. She closed the file. This matter is concluded. Divorce is granted. We're adjourned. The gavel came down. Serena didn't look at me as she left. Trevor Hastings gathered his papers quickly, whispering urgently to her as they walked out. Jordan turned to me. You gave her money. After everything she did. $50,000, I said. Enough for her to get an apartment, start over. Not enough to fund the lifestyle she wanted, but enough to survive. Why, he asked. I thought about it. Because mercy doesn't mean no consequences. It means you don't destroy someone completely when you have the power to. Your mother made terrible choices. She hurt both of us. But I won't become the kind of man who leaves someone with nothing. Jordan hugged me. You're a better person than she deserves. Maybe, I said, but I'm not doing it for her. I'm doing it so I can look you in the eye and know I did the right thing. Derek approached us. I just want to say thank you for being the father he needed. I shook his hand. Take care of yourself, Derek. I will, he said. And if Jordan ever wants to grab coffee, talk, whatever, I'm around. No pressure. Just, if he wants. Jordan looked at him. Maybe sometime. We'll see. Derek nodded and walked away. Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining. Jordan and I walked to my truck in silence. What happens now? He asked. Now we go home, I said. We live our lives. We move forward. He smiled. A real smile. Yeah, that sounds good. The cafe was busy for a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at a corner table, reviewing flight certification documents when she walked in. Her name was Claire, 37, an architect with a firm downtown. We'd met at an aerospace conference 4 months ago, started talking about structural integrity and aircraft design, and somehow ended up having dinner. Then another dinner. Then regular Sunday morning coffee dates that had become the best part of my week. She spotted me and smiled, weaving through the tables with 2 cups of coffee. Double espresso, no sugar, she said, setting one in front of me. You're a miracle worker, I said. She sat down, and I noticed something different in her expression. Nervous. Excited. So she said, I have news. I set down my pen. Good news or bad news? That depends on how you feel about it, she said. She took a breath. I'm pregnant. The world stopped. Just for a second. Then it started again, faster, brighter. You're sure? I asked. Took 3 tests. Saw the doctor yesterday. About 8 weeks. I reached across the table and took her hand. Claire, that's incredible. She laughed, relief flooding her face. I thought you might freak out. We haven't been together that long, and I know you said you tried for years with your ex, and it never happened, and I was worried. Claire, I interrupted gently. I want this. I want you. I want us. She smiled, tears in her eyes. Yeah. Yeah, I said. Absolutely. We got married 3 months later. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Jordan stood as my best man, wearing a suit he'd picked out himself. He and Claire had bonded over their shared love of terrible action movies and spicy food. The baby came in February. A daughter. We named her Grace. She had my eyes and Claire's smile, and when I held her for the first time in the hospital, I felt something I'd thought was lost forever. Hope. Pure, uncomplicated hope. Jordan came to visit that first week, bringing flowers for Claire and a stuffed bear for Grace. She's pretty cute, he said, looking down at his sister sleeping in my arms. She is, I agreed. You're happy, he observed. Like really happy. I am, I said. Are you okay with all this? With me remarrying, having another kid? He shook his head. Dad, you deserve this. You've spent your whole life taking care of other people. It's about time someone took care of you. Claire and Grace aren't responsibilities, I said. They're gifts. I know, Jordan said. But so are you. A year and a half after the divorce, I officially adopted Jordan. Derek signed the papers without hesitation, told me it was the right thing to do. Jordan took my last name legally, something he'd wanted since he was 12. Serena had moved to California. She tried to rebuild Radiant Essence under a different name, but the internet never forgets. Her new venture struggled. Last I heard, she was working as a wellness coach for someone else's company. I didn't feel satisfaction at her struggles. I didn't feel anything, really. She was part of a past I'd closed the door on. One Sunday morning, I was in the backyard with Grace, now 18 months old, teaching her to kick a soccer ball. Jordan was inside, making breakfast with Claire. Through the kitchen window, I could hear them laughing about something. Grace kicked the ball, squealed with delight, and ran toward me with her arms up. I picked her up, held her close, and looked at the house. My house. My family. This was what I'd fought for. Not revenge. Not victory. Just this. The chance to build something real with people who loved me without conditions. And standing there, with my daughter in my arms and my family inside, I realized something my father had told me years ago finally made sense. The best revenge, he'd said, is living well. He was right.